Hello everyone and welcome to the first video on my channel, or as hopefully we'll all come to know it, another shitty Joseph Anderson clone. It's funny how I start my channel by critiquing a franchise's end. Dark Souls Epilogue, The Ringed City. The Ringed City can either be started from Frida's boss room in the Painted World or from the path leading up to the Soul of Cinder. Both these locations work within the lore. We know from Ashes that Slave Knight Gale is going after the Dark Soul to use as a pigment to paint another world. We also know the Dark Soul is probably going to be in the Ringed City at World's End, so we can assume that Gale left the bonfire in Frida's room for us to follow. After the loading screen, you'll spawn in a room reminiscent of Lothric Castle, and upon stepping out, we're granted with one of many spectacular views that confirm we're right in the middle of World's End, or as it's called here, the Dreg Heap. The Dreg Heap as a whole uses its setting in every way it can, both visually and mechanically. In fact, I think World's End is the best application of setting in the level design in the entire series. I would be astounded if From ever topped what they've crafted here. And despite me thinking this, I don't think I've ever seen poorer item placement from any other area in Soulsborne. This is even worse in the Ringed City itself. You'll see what I mean as we go. There'll be an old pilgrim near the ledge who tells us she's only here for the view and that she has nothing for us. You get two dialogue options. I have business with you, and I have no business with you. I chose the first, and it turns out the cheeky fucker does have something for us. She sells us a few consumables and the Spitleaf greatsword, which is also a lie because it's actually a halberd. The rest of her dialogue is very interesting. She tells you the legend of the Ringed City after a bit of boss foreshadowing. Apparently, the Ringed City lies at World's End, and it was where the first pygmies who found the Dark Soul were exiled to. Exiled seems to conflict with the word gifted that we see in the description of the envoy banner we get from the Demon Prince. Another lie, or just different interpretations of Gwyn's actions. After you're done chatting with her, the only way to go is down. There's a message saying take the plunge. We'll later find out this is Gale trying to help us though, so it's okay in lore. Thankfully, Gale isn't an edgy prick like every other message tempting you off cliffs, and you don't die, which acts as the lesson for all the other times you end up diving off cliffs in the Dreg Heap. Apparently gravity is bugged because of the whole world ending thing. This is only a fraction of what I meant when I said that World's End was one of the best applications of setting and level design. It's lore friendly, it's thematically appropriate. After the drop, there's a bridge and two pathways. Good luck getting across the bridge though, because you're about to be swamped with human dregs. There are three types of dregs, but we only see two here. The most common type is the one that crawls towards you on the floor. Getting surrounded by these is a death sentence, but the game gives the player a small advantage. Since they have to cross the bridge to get to you, you're able to choke them into a small space, which is great for any build. If you run across the bridge, you will probably die, but you aren't entirely safe on the other end either, because the second type of dreg, the caster, shoots tracking deep souls, which dealt about half my health when hit. This effectively means you have to keep your eyes on two things at once, which is actually preparing you for the boss. Almost every encounter in the Dreg Heap is at least a 2v1, so by the time the 2v1 boss comes around, you're well prepared. After all those, of which there are a damn lot, you've got two paths. Left leads up some stairs, right leads up a fucking cliff. So of course, most players go left, where you'll encounter the first Herald Knight. They're incredibly aggressive and rush you relentlessly, so your dodging needs to be on point. Again, this is preparing you for the bread and butter attacks of the upcoming boss. Their Dark Soul head, along with the fact that there's a staircase to your left, indicates the special plunging attack you can do on these guys. For me, it only ended up doing about half of its health, but it was enough to turn the tides of the fight in my favour. It rewards the observant player, and I think that's great, but after having seen it once, it kind of made every other Herald Knight an annoyance to deal with rather than a tough fight. They'll kill you if you let them live, so you have to deal with them, and the best way to do that is by dropping your sword into their heads, over and over and over and over. With him dead, you can go get the Aquamarine Dagger, which is one of the coolest weapons in Dark Souls 3. Down the other path, you dive off a cliff, smash through the glass walls of Cathedral, which only looks cool 2/5 of the time when you don't sort of slide off the walls. Down here there's a sneaky drake who pops out of the floor right where you land, and if you don't react immediately, it grabs you. There's no reason for the player to see this coming, so I think it's kind of cheap, especially since it does such a large amount of damage. If you live past that, the third type of dreg, the giant deep soul thing, rushes you. These are very easy to dodge, but will completely destroy you if you get hit, so they're only really a threat in group fights. This is just a well-placed warning. There's a bunch of hidden items stuffed in the nooks of this room for those who didn't see the angel outside and immediately have a heart attack. Yeah, as soon as you step outside to look for the next path, a massive zombified butterfly turns around, calls you a wanker, and shoots a barrage of light spears at you. I think every player ran down the ramparts here and immediately took cover. After a bit, she'll stop firing and you have a chance to run down to the next platform. The angels become the area-defining mechanic here. You need to time your movements to progress, similar to the jailers in Ethereal Dungeon, but with the added pressure of having to check every room you enter for holes that might give her line of sight. Holes are either just there, or form as you go along, once again using World's End to its potential. From the platform there's a wooden scaffold and a door straight on. Obviously you have to go through the door if you don't want to get fried. 2 Lothric knights stand at the other end of the room. One has a sword and shield. One has a new spear. This goes the way of all the other Lothric knight encounters during the base game. Backstab and kick if you're a melee build, Black Flame with pyro, and so on. The new spear doesn't change the overall strategy of the fight, but it does mix up the dynamic. Not only can he poke you for a huge amount of damage, but he can also use the weapon art to summon some kind of light banner to buff his buddy, who will sprint towards you as the spear guy only walks. This keeps them split and teaches you to make sure to never take on more than one. I'll give you 3 guesses as to what this is preparing you for. The spear guy drops the Lothric war banner when he dies. I don't think an item really channels the meaning of Dark Souls better than this one. You don't even have to read the item description to see that. It's a tattered, withering banner of little light, but it's still capable of bringing out the strength in its followers after countless ages past. Really appropriate for the setting and the fact that the series is ending. Moving through the next door, we find ourselves in a courtyard with 2 paths. Right leads to a few rooms with infinitely spawning dregs and an item at the end, and left triggers a tower to fall, smashing through the front wall of the room we were just in. You can go either left or back to the room. Regardless, this is the best way the game uses World's End in the level design from start to finish. Back in the room we can use the tower as a bridge over to a new area with a few enemies and items behind an NPC and a bonfire. The NPC is called Lap and he is a hollow, much like Lucatiel from Dark Souls 2, though he doesn't seem particularly bothered by his hollowing. Back down to where the path split, underneath the tower leads you to a kind of rooted undead. Turns out these are the sources of the angels, which you'll find out when you kill it and the angel dies. As we keep moving we come across more drops and more dregs and another Herald Knight, but this time with no way to cheese him. There's a homeward bone at the ledge after the fight, which is a cheeky way of tricking the player into thinking it's a dead end so they backtrack and see the bridge formed from the collapsing tower. Simple but effective. You and I know this is no dead end. Jumping off leads us to a bonfire and Lap if you talked to him previously. He has a bunch of dialogue about the legends of the Ring City and solemn duty. It turns out the area we found ourselves in is the Earthen Peak Ruins, which is the World's End remnant of the Earthen Peak from Dark Souls 2. There's a lot of references to 2 in the Dreg Heap, which is great to see, as I feel like it was ignored to a ridiculous extent in the base game, especially since Dark Souls 2 is entirely responsible for the events of 3. Though I do have to question Earthen Peak being the area they decided to bring back, as, to be frank, Dark Souls 3 had enough fucking swamps, and Dark Souls 2 had a lot more interesting areas. It's good then that the Earthen Peak Ruins is one of the best areas in the game. You can imagine it as 2 small areas, a shooting gallery and the swampy shooting gallery, split by a fallen Earthen Peak windmill. I call them the shooting gallery because once again we have to deal with the angels, and once again they're used to force the player into making quick decisions rather than taking levels slowly. This is one of few mechanics the series has used to ramp up the pace of the game outside of bosses, and I think there was no better place to use it than World's End. The path from the bonfire leads you into a big, eroded looking open area with a bunch of cover, which is of course very important as you've got about 5 seconds to get your ass behind something before the angels kill you. Interestingly, the little slave fuckers from the Grand Archives make a return here, and they seem to be in the same situation we are. You can see 2 of them running for the crack in the mill, but usually only one will make it before the angel kills the other. Of course, we can use this opportunity to run into the mill ourselves, a fun mechanic we've only seen before in the Undead Settlement when you could use the giant archer being occupied with shooting the Roman hollows to get across unharmed. Inside the mill you can jump down to the swamp. This area works almost the same as the one before, but this time you've got the added threat of a poisonous swamp, mushroom pricks, and the angel's new cursing pixie dust, which imposes a strict limit on the amount of time you can spend behind cover. Oh yeah, and now there's 2 angels. The shack-like buildings and the broken mill combine to hide a lot of items both on top and within. This is another masterful application of the creative freedom granted by the setting of World's End that allows the designers to weave two entirely different types of areas into one. It's like Farron Woods, but not shit. At the other end of the swamp is a cave and a route. If you follow the route, you get the Ring of Favour +3, aka the best ring of the game. Interesting item placement. It turns out this is just the tip of the iceberg, as we'll see in the Ring City. You might think the cave is the most reliable source of cover here, but there's also a Herald Knight, so unless you can end the fight quickly, you need to be in and out in a flash. The next bit of cover is a giant fibrous root thing that twists throughout the area. You can follow one of them to another Herald Knight in a two-path split. One leads to the route for the Swamp Angel, the other leads to a fight with Desert Pyromancer Zoe, who's being backed up with a few slaves. Obviously the trick is to kill the slaves, then go for her, but that's not the only trick up her sleeve. She's got the Pyromancy Pyro Fan, which is effectively a close-range bitch slap for pyromancers. However, this doesn't really help her, because as long as you can get close enough once or twice, stun-locking her down is simple. It sure as shit wasn't simple for me, as her health bar was longer than an original curly wurly, but it just boiled down to get close, stun lock until out of stamina, recharge stamina, repeat. She drops her Pyro Fan for us, which actually fits into the current Pyromancy roster very well. It doesn't do as much damage as the Black Flame or Combustion, but it does have far more range, so it balances out. A great addition. From here, the path leads back out into the open, but you'll be on the same level as the angels this time, so you can employ your dodge and weave strategy to get to the end of the route, jump off onto the furthest section of Broken Mill, and then roll down onto the final bonfire of the Dreg Heap. Where you need to go next is obvious. This is probably one of the coolest boss fight introductions in the entire series, only perhaps behind the Ivory King. Upon smashing into the crater, you'll immediately notice that we're in a 2v1. There's the demon in pain and the demon from below, but their names only matter at the end. For now, they're functionally the same. There are two roles either demon can occupy, and they will routinely switch, but they can only have the same role for about 15 seconds at a time. The first is the fire-empowered aggressor. This demon will just sort of rush you with smashes, swipes and flurries, a moveset we were prepared for by the Herald Knights. The second demon will stay back, shooting an explosive trail of death at you, which will be lethal if the aggressor gets a hit in too. You also need to be ready to switch focus quickly when the demons begin their 15-second roll swap. I was a New Game Plus Pyromancer, so you can imagine how fucking long it took me to kill them both. Despite this time investment, I took them down on my second try when I learned how to dodge every move the aggressor has. I thought the fight was a great idea with some pretty awesome execution, but it was a tad too easy. Of course, that run didn't last for long as soon as I realised that there was a second phase, the Demon Prince. Visually, his moveset is only rivaled by the Nameless King, and someone else will fight later on. The power behind every attack he has can be felt by the player both from the earth-shattering explosions, swoops and smashes, but also from the fact that he can blow you back from just a single flap of his wings, and that the power of his laser attack actually knocks you back even if you aren't hit. Is it the coolest demon fight in all of video gaming? Yes, it is. Does it make the Demon King look about as threatening as a rainbow-coloured koala bear? Yes, it does. It may look utterly fucking astounding, but it does have a few problems. First one is simple. His health bar is too big. On New Game it's barely acceptable. A long fight, but an awesome one. On New Game Plus, it was simply shocking. His moveset is incredibly strong, and I ended up being able to dodge his attacks by a hair, if at all. Of course, this all comes down to skill, but it was the fact that I had to stay alive longer than the fucking Stone Age, choosing my moments to throw a black flame orb for a tiny amount of damage that gave the fight its difficulty. Of course, you could argue that it's supposed to be ridiculous on Plus. That's what the mode is for, and then I would say, why did every other boss on Plus scale to a reasonable degree? Killing the Demon Prince gets you his soul and the small envoy banner, which allows you to travel to the Ring City. If you've ever played Uncharted, you know exactly what to expect from the visuals around here. As you go down the staircase, you'll find a rambling NPC who only shows up here. He asks you whether or not you serve the gods. If you say yes, he calls you a prick. If you say nah, he says me too. The outcome remains the same though. He says he knows you're after the Dark Soul. We know Gale is, and we know we're following Gale, so sure. Continuing down the stairs, you'll find a bridge with one of the most visually impressive encounters in the game. A giant in the distance continually summons ghostly ruin archers who fire, in legion, a barrage of arrows that will kill you even quicker than the angels. The gravestones along the bridge act as your cover, but they'll only get you so far. Eventually you'll have to roll onto a platform down to the right. The only clue From leaves is the slightly weathered brick at the edge, which I don't think is going to be enough for a lot of players, especially those in offline mode who can't see the messages or bloodstains. From the platform you walk to the edge of the bridge where you can get up top and kill the summoner. On New Game you can rush him down fairly quick, but on Plus or Plus Plus it's highly unlikely you'll have the damage potential, so you have to dodge his personal arrow guard and his melee summon. This has the opposite problem that the Demon Prince has. If you aren't playing on New Game Plus, you won't get to see the summoner's moveset. He's an interesting enemy by himself, and the fact that he has actually planned for someone getting close to him is a nice cherry on top. It may have looked amazing with the flower bed bridge and the beautiful red arches contrasting against the grey-yellow of the stone, but we've had a lot of encounters like this in the series before. The dragon in Dark Souls 1 for example. And every time getting past it boils down to completely evading the obstacle somehow. I wish the first of the final two encounters like this we'll ever have had changed it up a bit. Perhaps there's a magical shield that lets you push through them for a bit longer, allowing you to get to the end without being killed. Perhaps there's a secret path you can take along the bridge in which the archers can't hit you or won't fire that you have to decipher from the NPC's dialogue. Regardless, it's still the best encounter of its kind and a mesmerizingly beautiful introduction to the Ring City. Behind the summoner is the next path. As you walk along, the scariest NPC in Soulsborne just starts reading you a fucking bedtime story in a hauntingly calm voice. He cryptically references the story of a bunch of characters from Souls lore and then finishes everything he has to say with "Fear not the dark, my friend, and let the feast begin." He's probably referencing the fact that the Age of Fire is due to end next Tuesday at this point in the game, but I haven't got a clue what he means by the feast. Either way, I think his disturbing nature serves as the introduction to the more poisoned and twisted background behind the Ring City. His heart attack-inducing jump scare prepares you for the more aggressive enemies hiding along this path. They could shoot you with lightning spears, jump in the air and do a plunging attack, stab and push. They're only dangerous when you have to take your focus away from them, but for now they're just fodder. Through the door is the next bonfire in a room with 3 doors and an interesting statue. I described the other door as the gateway to hell for a reason, because as soon as we step through that door the DLC goes from slightly challenging to sadistic. The staircase itself isn't too bad. There's a bunch of fodder enemies, one of whom will ambush you, and some new cursing guys. Stay close for too long, you die, so it really only acts to get you moving. At the bottom of the staircase we step out into the midst of the Ring City. The first Ring Knight gets a frankly epic entrance as he slowly walks up the stairs to face you in a generously large arena. He's got a basic sword and shield, but it's completely impractical to try and break through his defense, and his sword flares up to become the Soul of Cinder all over again. You can break your block in about 2 hits, and to match his massive sword he's got an even longer health bar. But his moves are very bad at roll catching, so you can get behind him for a few hits every time he attacks. They aren't the only new enemy type introduced in this area though. When you approach the room following the Ring Knight's stairway, a strange cleric tortoise crossbreed thing scrambles out. These are the most annoying enemies in Dark Souls 3. Their primary attack is to summon a damaging rune of light in the exact spot you're standing, so when you hear the audio cue you've got to roll away immediately. This completely ruins the rhythm of any fight you get into, so of course they need to be your first target. Thing is, when you hit them for enough damage they retreat into their shells and heal themselves back to full. So if you don't have enough DPS to take them out of their shell and onto their backs, killing them is going to be entirely dependent on how much damage you can get in when the fight starts. It's a bit of a clusterfuck when you've aggroed more than one, which to be honest isn't enjoyable. I died to these guys no times. Yet, every time I saw them, I sighed, and I never sighed harder than the encounter with the second Ring Knight down the stairs from the room we just entered. This Ring Knight is unlike the first in that A, the space you have to fight him is significantly smaller than the last time, B, he has a spear and a great shield rather than a sword and shield, which is far more difficult to deal with than the first, and C, he now has one of the Teenage Mutant Ninja clerics backing him up. You can lure him out of range with the turtle, which is fine, and you'll even get a slightly larger arena, but this guy's moveset makes him the most difficult non-boss enemy in Dark Souls 3. And a lot of that is down to how fast he raises his shield after an attack, which makes getting in any significant damage a difficult task. Of course, you could just use a greatsword and completely cheese him, but if you want a strength build, bringing him down is going to take a frankly annoying amount of time. There's 3 Herald Knights down here, but thankfully From showed a little bit of mercy in allowing you to run past them fairly easily. You can run up a ledge to the right which leads to a bridge. You cross the bridge to explore a small area, or wait until the nights pass, plunging attack the final one and run for your fucking life. Once you pass the patrol, you find a corridor with a bunch of curse guys, of which there are so many it's probably easier to just run. And you better keep running, because there's a ring knight and a bunch of lightning spear pricks just round the corner. I generally don't know how From expects anyone who is in a high skill strength build to fight through them. I get that having corridors filled with enemies is a good way to raise the tension, but I don't really understand what purpose it serves here. Your character might be safe on this ledge, but you sure as shit won't be, because creepy locust guy makes a return, this time reading us another random story as if we were mid-conversation. From the ledge you can jump into the 5th fucking swamp of Dark Souls 3. The ring city opens up a little here, but I don't know if that's for the best. There's a bonfire 100 meters from the start of the swamp, it's not particularly hard to get to, and it acts as an excellent hub for all the stuff around here. But the city opens up before we get to that bonfire, so there's no reason to assume there would be one where it is over the other numerous paths we have available to us. This is problematic because the run back from the first save room is seriously long, and you will very likely be making this run as every way we can go from the swamp has some challenging fight. If we go to our left and up the ladder, there's a drop onto a stone path leading us into a room where you'll be invaded by Silver Knight Lido. Unfortunately, this fight plays out like the Ring Knights. If you have a greatsword, he won't be able to poise through your attacks, and then the fight comes down to timing. If you use any other melee weapon, you'll trade, and unsurprisingly, his big-ass hammer does a huge amount of damage. So it becomes an endurance fight, which is boring. Killing him nets you his hammer, which requires 60 strength. I think that's the highest requirement in the entire game, possibly the series. But if you do have that much strength, you'll get a fittingly cool moveset. Though I don't think the fight was worth it for players who aren't running around with high strength, especially since those who are probably had a far easier time. Other than Lido and an item, it's a dead end. He was originally supposed to drop his armor, and I honestly have no clue why he doesn't. It's a shame, really. Heading back to the ladder, we can go right, past where Loco Locus sits, over a bridge with 2 spear-wielding ring knights. Fighting one is a challenge, so all I have to say is good fucking luck. This is not only incredibly difficult, but also pointless, once again. That leaves the swamp for us to explore, and let me preface, I am disappointed that they use another swamp. This is one of the best swamps in the game, but myself and anyone in their right mind would have probably preferred an actual city rather than just an open space with things in it. The first thing you'll fight in the swamp will be the locusts. They wield ice stick things which they use to skewer you in a variety of different ways. Their moveset is wide but heavily telegraphed. It's actually difficult to get hit by these things for any other reason than the camera fucking about when they prepare their air attack. This would be fine were it not for their health bars. They're fucking insects, come on From. This isn't even artificial difficulty, it's just wasted time. Thankfully, you'll only have to fight one alone once to get to the bonfire room. From there, towards the sunken building, they come in packs, and that makes them a much more interesting fight. Speaking of locusts, bedtime story Bob makes a return here, and this time the point he's trying to make becomes a lot clearer. He tells us of a girl scared of abyssal creatures gnawing at her flesh, probably Miracle Lady from Firelink. His story begins to make sense when he says that no such creature existed. His point is that the abyss isn't as bad as everyone makes it out to be. This is what he means by fear not the dark, and we also get some closure on the meaning of let the feast begin from a mask nearby the bonfire. Apparently these locusts are meant to conduct sermons, pulling men to the dark, but few can think past their own stomachs. The swamp from here is pretty much only completely unlinked individual fights. There's the second summoner, who works the exact same way the first one did, the Dragon Slayer armor, who's apparently been fired from Lothric after he got his ass kicked by you and came here on vacation. I'm not even kidding, that's literally the lore. It works just fine since the DLC is set thousands of years after the events of Dark Souls 3. He drops his armor, which is nice, but I think his placement is questionable. He's just hanging out at the far end of the swamp, and while that's fine in the lore, in the game it's just a bit lazy. The final random fight is the Ring Knights over at the building. You don't have to fight all 5, but the more you do fight, the more loot you'll get. There's no interior, the only purpose it serves is a ramp up to the valley, where we'll have our first encounter with Dark Eater Midir. This guy makes the Drake from Dark Souls 1 look like a fucking kitten with a cigarette lighter strapped to its head. He repeats the usual bathe the bridge in fire routine, which has never looked better. Before challenging Midir though, we can go to our right to find a room with a shortcut back to the bonfire and a puzzle. I think most people did get this shortcut simply through trying to find a way past Midir, so I'll assume we all had an equal footing going to the next area. As for the puzzle, calling this a puzzle is offensive to puzzles. This is fucking puzzle appropriation. The script on the wall reads, "Show your humanity." So use an emberite? No, to be fair, that would be far too easy. There's some broken statues around the script, so perhaps you need to restore the third one in the sequence. How do you do that? At a stretch, we can guess that some players thought that using chameleon or a white branch would do the trick. You have to cast the spell enough times for the RNG to give you the statue, so if you don't have enough branches or you kill Magic Mike for the Hollow quest, go fuck yourself. But it turns out not even that's the solution. You can stand here for as long as you fucking like, nothing happens. No, the correct solution is to head out into the swamp, use the branches, luck into getting a humanity sprite, and then return. Puzzles need to tell you their solutions in some way or another, or they're not puzzles. This one doesn't, so it can stick its branches of yore up its arse. What's even more offensive is what lies behind it, the Purging Monument. You know, that thing that Hollows have come from all ages to access, the second most important thing about the Ring City? That. It allows you to join the Covenant for PvP invasions as the next boss, so yeah, it's pretty important. The game actually relies on people getting to this. How could they possibly hide such an important thing behind such a shit puzzle? Pretending that didn't happen, how do we get past the bridge? Well, after observing for a while, I think most players will figure out there's a safe period to rush across while Midir circles back round after attacking. High vigor builds can actually tank straight through the flames if they heal immediately afterwards, but most people will have to duck into a crevice to the right before making it to the door. I like this timing mechanic far more than evading the problem entirely. It's a lot more fun, even if we have seen it before in Lothric. The door leads into a spiral crypt, for lack of better words. It's literally a spiral staircase, but with offshoots into other rooms, though traversing it isn't as simple as one would think. Near the start there's a bit of stair that collapses underneath you, and then there's a ledge you need to jump down to later. This isn't any less tense than running across the bridge though, because all while you do this you'll be invaded by the Moaning Knight. He's using Morn's set and hammer with a Moaning shield. Having fought Lido, this guy wasn't nearly as tough because he never uses his weapon art, but to balance that you need to account for the much more restrictive space. I think this area might have been too hard a contrast against the huge open spaces we were just in, but the restriction is by no means wasted. After he's dead and you make it to the top, there's a bonfire and a way out. The quality of this bonfire's placement all comes down to how much trouble the Moaning Knight gave you. On one hand, if you didn't notice the shortcut you would have had to fight through any number of locusts, at least one Ring Knight, and get past Midir only to have to fight him. On the other hand, with the shortcut, there's nowhere near enough space between the two bonfires, and as I said before, I think the vast majority of players will have unlocked it. The strange thing is, there's an infinitely better place they could have had this second bonfire up ahead after our second encounter with Midir. This guy doesn't give up. His first move is going to be to fry the entire path, but after that he'll charge up a sweeping attack. Obviously, this is your time to run into the cover just in front of him. From here we'll be able to fight back by popping out every opportunity we get and getting a few hits in. Midir will respond to this by flaming the ground or later by doing a Godzilla beam. At around 50% health, he'll have a fit of aggression and use everything he's got in a few seconds. As long as you dodge this, you'll win the fight by stabbing him in the face, which will send him down into the caverns. Definitely the coolest dragon encounter in the Soul series. Finally, we can actually fight back rather than just shooting from afar with 150 arrows. Anyway, we can now head across the bridge. The first room has fuck all in it except for an invisible wall with another cleric and a half shell, then a soul, then lightning arrow, which is a more reliable but less damaging lightning spear. I don't know how to feel about this. I'd rather the room be more interesting over an illusion wall. This might have been because the second bonfire was originally supposed to go here, but perhaps got moved back because they thought Midir might have been too tough. Well, they sure as shit didn't keep that in mind for his boss fight. Up the stairs we come across an interesting statue of Gwyn and a few paths. I have 3 problems with this room, which is probably a record given its size. Number 1. There's an elevator right next to the staircase we came up on that blends into the walls so well it's hard to notice. I know for a fact I'm not the only one who missed this, and given its importance, I think it's just fucking annoying whether it was intentional or not. The elevator leads up to a shortcut door all the way back at the start of the Ring City. The best holy shit moments in the Soul series are when the level design surprises you, and this is the first time I didn't see a link back in Dark Souls 3 coming. It felt just like the chapel elevator from Dark Souls 1, but not quite as good. That's not the only thing the elevator has for us though. Like so many other elevators in Lothric and Drang Lake, the engineers forgot to build a brake for people who want to get off on any floor that isn't the top or the ground. I thought these were gimmicky enough the first time the Soul series did it, but the 59th time we've seen since then takes the fucking cake. Remember that item that Gwyn was holding back down on the ground floor? This is how you get to it. Remember that fucking awesome dragon we just fought? This is how we access our final fight with him. Who the fuck thought this was a good idea? Who in their right mind thought putting two of the most anticipated things in the Ring City behind one of these shitty elevator puzzles was good design? Speaking of FromSoft's apparent drug abuse, I'll give you all three guesses as to what Gwyn's holding. Is it the Dark Soul? Is it some kind of key that changes something in an Orlando? Is it fucking Guinevere's iCloud password? No, it's a +3 ring that is negligibly superior to its +2 variant. Go away, FromSoft. They could have had any of the other awesome weapons like the Ring Knight Straight Sword here instead of on some fucking mound, and it would have been so much less disappointing than a +3 ring. What the fuck did the Pygmy Lord need a Chloranthy ring for anyway? He's clearly still low on stamina. We haven't even got on to the third problem yet, albeit the least important of them. But before that, let's have a look at Midir's fight. I'll start by saying this dragon has the coolest moveset of any boss not only in Soulsborne, but in my opinion ever. If I could visualize the meanings of the words bestial, feral, aggressive and desperate, it would look something like Midir. As you approach the wounded dragon, it gets up, extends its wings and roars like a cornered cat. Then it rushes you in a burst of aggression and the fight begins. Midir is capable of shooting explosive laser beams from his mouth, bathing entire areas of the arena in flame, snapping his jaws like something out of Jurassic Park, and all manners of other basic attacks you'd expect from a dragon. Midir may look amazing, but that'll only keep you impressed for as long as it takes for you to be utterly destroyed by the aimbotted laser attack or the snap that has no fucking telegraph at all. Unreasonably difficult moves to evade, coupled with a health bar longer than every original fucking curly wurly ever produced, makes this fight the perfect exemplar of an endurance fight. Got 15 plus 10 Estus? Good. Don't? Fuck you. Do you even have enough health to survive a single hit from his ridiculous attacks? No? Well, there's always sin. I imagine the health bar was meant to combat the fact that this boss is insanely easy to exploit. Here's how you do it. Run up to him, attack head. When he perches up to firebomb the space underneath him, run to tail, attack tail. When he turns around, he'll present his head, attack head. Repeat. This and a spot of pestilent mercury destroys this boss. That doesn't make it easy. You'll still have to keep this up for a huge amount of time, so it's boring and long. From needs to decrease the health bar hugely, damage by a bit, and he needs an answer to the exploit. Back upstairs as we exit the room, the first thing we'll notice is the skybox. Yes, by climbing some stairs the sky has gone from day to night. And this isn't broken up by entire dungeons like the transition from Farron Keep to Irithyll. It's just a staircase and a whole lot of pain. We can look down and see that the swamp isn't spewing some kind of sunscreening gas. So what's the excuse? I actually didn't notice the transition from day to night as we walked from the city into the swamp. That's because I was more focused on running away from things. As long as the player doesn't notice the change, you can get away with it, but no steps are taken to ensure that this time. Dark Souls 1 did this perfectly. And Orlando was sunny because of Gwendolyn's illusion. Darkroot Garden looks like it's night because we're actually underground. This wasn't at the sacrifice of immersion, in fact it made the world feel real. And that's something the series has progressively got worse at doing. At least the arena looks nice. Really nice actually, and that makes for yet another awesome backdrop for our fight with the fourth and final type of Ring Knight. This one has the paired greatsword, arguably even cooler than the straight sword, and he is tough as fucking nails. He leaves few opportunities to attack and does huge amounts of damage, but there's enough space available and no one else to fuck with you, which makes it a far fairer duel. Despite this, I ended up wasting about 10 Estus on this guy, which left me with 1 for what I assumed was going to be the next boss. And sure enough, it was. The Spear of the Church. This fight is one of the most unique bosses in the game, despite its primary mechanic being taken from Demon Souls and Dark Souls 2. Judicator Argo, one of the towering summoners, calls you a wanker for ignoring the no entry sign and summons a painting guardian to take you down. Obviously, this isn't the boss. The real deal spawns in some time later and is either controlled by an NPC, or, if you're online at the time, a player. The player gets buffed health and a cool spear attack instead of Estus. Other than that, it's just their normal build. I think it's fair to say you're meant to take a summon with you to even out the playing field, especially since the difficulty of the fight can be wildly different based on the skill of the spear who gets summoned. Thing is, the fight also varies based on the skill of your summon. I had zero Estus going into this fight. I wish I still had the gameplay to show you guys. I didn't want to go back to a bonfire because I'd have to fight the Ring Knight again, so I just summoned the guy with the biggest sword and went in. I fought the Guardian, my summon fought the boss. I don't think we should have come out on top with those odds, but we ended up destroying them both. Not easily, but not as challenging as I felt the boss should have been. While I was glad to have beaten the boss first try, I couldn't help but feel underwhelmed. What about other people? Did they get a good summon? Did they get a bad one? This fight is more luck-based than any other boss in the entire series, and though I had my fun, I would have had a lot more if the fight was built around my skills solely, not the skill of me, my summon, and the boss itself. I think this should have been the optional boss, honestly, and Midir should have gotten the extra development time to help him become the fight he should have been. Moving on, we can go up some stairs and then up some more, cooler stairs to find ourselves in Princess Filianor's chamber, which has to be one of the most beautiful rooms in Soulsborne. There's Indie Mouse's next video, Top 10 Dark Souls Rooms. She holds a broken egg on her lap while she sleeps. Perhaps it once housed Midir. We touch it because of course we do, and it rakes, sending us into the future, into one of the coolest cutscenes in Souls. Filianor is now a corpse and everything around her chamber is dust. We can see Lothric and Anor Londo in the distance, but everything else is gone. This is the place from the trailers and the box art. This is the end of the Dark Souls world. We step out to find a pygmy lord crawling towards us, begging Filianor for help. He says the Red Hood has come to eat our Dark Souls. You can watch as he crawls all the way back, but he dies no matter what you do. Perhaps if we didn't take the Chloranthy ring he could escape. It would have been amazing if the game did that. The space we're given to explore is absolutely and appropriately huge. It's a long walk over to the ruins in the distance, and there we find all the other lords, all dead, and Gale. He asks you for your Dark Soul, but you say no, he gets pissed, and so we have the final boss of the Soul series. Despite this fight being incredible, and I'm saying this a lot, one of the best in Soulsborne, I do wish we got something a bit more spectacular than a man with arseless chaps, but that's not a valid criticism. This fight is separated into 3 phases, like Frida, but unlike her, the health bar stays the same for the entire fight. Phase 1 is a series of wild but very avoidable swings. The key to this phase is learning the correct direction to dodge for each move and to always try to dodge late. When we get into phase 2, the music changes into something far more powerful to match Gale's new moveset. Now he's got a much longer range, follow-ups to almost every attack he does, and a fucking crossbow which he uses on both the ground and in the air like a Class A badass. The new strategy is strafing to either side and making damn sure his combo is over before you go in for an attack. As long as you stay close and learn to run away when he charges up his spin attack, phase 2 is the easiest of the 3. At a third health, Gale will charge up a giant blood explosion shooting out souls that weakly track you. Wherever they land, lightning will strike, so make sure you draw Gale away from them before trying to attack again. If he hits you at the same time as a lightning strike, it's game over. Phase 3 Gale is ravenously aggressive and leaves far fewer opportunities for an attack. The best advice I can give for this part is to make sure you don't get greedy. And with the final hit, we win Dark Souls. An excellently designed fight which at no point felt unfair. The hitboxes are as perfect as the theatrics. There's no cutscene, just his soul which explains everything. We know Gale wanted the Dark Soul so the painter in Ariandel could create a new world with it. We know the Dark Soul is in the Ring City, which is obviously why Gale is here. But we now know that Gale knew the Dark Soul would corrupt him, because he isn't a champion, which is why he's been leaving you this trail of breadcrumbs for us to follow. So we could get the blood of the Dark Soul from him and give it to the painter, and that's what we're gonna do. That is what I call storytelling. Once again, Vromsoft knocks it out of the park. Returning to Ariandel, we find everything to be on fire. Perhaps because we showed the painter flame. We give her the Dark Soul and she thanks us, asking us if we want the world to be named after us. And that's it. Part of me wishes she called the world Yharnam. Part of me doesn't. Either way, with the cycle ended, this painting represents hope. The perseverance of life we see so often in Dark Souls. I always thought the meaning of these games was just this. Keep on going, stay determined, and you can overcome anything. And even with the world ending, we find a way to birth something new. I thought Dark Souls 3 had strayed too far from these themes, especially with the ignoring of the incredibly important events of Dark Souls 2. But now, the Ring City provides the ending to our beloved cycle that we all deserved. And I think, as for the game itself, it stands as one of the best DLCs we've ever gotten. 2 new, excellently designed areas. Certainly far from perfect, but excellent nonetheless. The Drake Heap handled its setting and level design better than the Ring City, which suffered greatly from the placement of its areas and items. But the Ring City was probably the most visually stunning area I've seen from a game in a long time. I'm not going to do a comparison of the DLCs to the other 3 games, but I do feel like Ashes and the Ring City combined is absolutely the best stuff we've ever gotten. Even better than the Old Hunters, which I think is an apt comparison because it was meant to be 2 separate packs initially. Perhaps that's unfair because the Ring City ended an entire series while the Old Hunters had to exist within such a bizarre, Lovecraftian world, which I know can be a bitch to deal with. Regardless, we don't know for sure, but the Ring City might be the final piece of Soulsborne we ever get, and if so, it ended on a high note. So now it's time for a tactical retrospective. I think I sounded far more critical than I intended to be. That's likely a symptom of my lack of experience in the whole audio recording thing. I love this DLC, and even though the item placement in the Ring City was comically dumb, I don't hate it as much as my best Gordon Ramsay impression would let on. I have to apologise for the mistakes I made while reading the script. Again, I'm new at this, and I've always had trouble reading out loud without sounding like Mike Tyson having a fit. That problem should be exclusive to this video only. It was a big learning experience. The final thing I'd like to mention is the gameplay. I deleted all mine while recording the script, which to be fair was only half my fault. I contacted Shirako, a great gameplay and soundtrack YouTuber, and he gave me permission to use his gameplay. All the scenes with Artorias or Ornstein in them was him, while the Black Knight was me. Oh yeah, this is the actual final thing, I swear. Special thanks to Joseph Anderson for A, inspiring me to do this stuff, and B, for giving me some great advice along the way. I'll see you guys in the next video, which could be on anything. Darksiders 2 is a big project of mine that'll hopefully put this video to shame. Prototype was the first script I ever wrote for this channel, but I haven't gotten around to recording for it. If I do go with that, it'll be a very long video. I have another script on Minecraft waiting in which I tear the game to shreds. That should be very easy to record for, so maybe it'll be out sooner. I can't say for sure what's up next, but stay tuned. And with that, it's time to end.